So we've got a channel member with a comment here about stimulus checks, and I think it's a brilliant topic that we should discuss. The potential of stimmy checks coming back to America. Let's analyze this. Garrett Purrington says, if we hit a hard recession with this administration, referring to the Biden administration between now and 2024, they will simply give more handouts one way or another, pushing inflation. The push-pull. In 10 years, prices will be skyrocketing. So let's try to break this down and analyze if and how stimulus checks could make it back to the United States. And boy, stimmy checks would be another fun session of video topics that we haven't got to talk about in quite a while. So let's talk about the potential of stimmy checks now. I think the easiest way to do it is draw it out. So let's do it together. First, I think in order to expect stimulus of any kind, we would have to have massive pain and massive job loss. Now, Elizabeth Warren is already expecting somewhere around 3 million job losses. And the way she accomplishes that is by saying if the unemployment rate today is 3.5% and the Fed thinks it'll go to 4.5%, the Fed, then the reality is once the unemployment rate goes up 1%, history suggests the unemployment rate will go up another percent. So history suggests we're going to go here. Since we've got just over 150 million people working in America, history suggests we should have about 3 million job losses. At the same time, economic forecasts are really calling for a recession or negative GDP growth sometime in Q3, Q4, right around the holidays, and so call it a holiday recession. See, Christmas sweater, holiday recession. It's almost like I wore this by design. So, what could potentially the impact of a holiday recession be? Well, first of all, if we're in a recession, if we actually hit a recession, usually and historically, that doesn't mean that it will happen this time, but usually and historically, the stock market bottoms at the start of a recession. So if the stock market bottoms at the start of a recession, and the recession hasn't technically started yet, then pain in the stock market could still be ahead of us. So the stock market usually bottoms at the start of recession. The only way to really then historically suggest that the stock market hasn't hit bottom yet, or has already hit bottom rather, would be to say that there's no recession, which is possible that there's not a recession. But for the purposes of arguing stimulus checks, let's assume the stock market hits a new bottom. At the same time, we get mass joblessness. That is a sudden wave of 3 million jobless individuals, and that joblessness creates a jobless spiral. Jobless spiral. This is, I think, where the government would want to intervene, because remember the velocity of money. When one person spends $5 at a hot dog stand, the person who takes that $5 then goes and spends that $5 on an employee to help him at the hot dog stand. That employee then spends their wages on goods and services. Car cleanings, a muffler for their car, radar detector for their car, I don't know, whatever they want. Food, basic necessities, laundry, whatever. And you have this circulation through the economy. And modern economic thought suggests that when somebody spends money, it usually circulates through the economy about 4 to 5 times. But if 3 million people have less money to actually spend on goods and services, then you could actually take away 4 to 5 times as much money, which would basically means if 3 million people don't have income, you could see the impact of what could be as much as 12 million people without jobs because of the velocity of money amplification effect. Now, obviously, there are employment insurance programs. And this is actually where I think the government could stop a jobless spiral, because if 12 million people were out of work, then earnings at companies are going to plummet. Then they're going to hire less people, and then you get the spiral. Less earnings, they fire more people. They then hire less people, right? So they hire less people, they fire more people, so more people permanently unemployed in the cycle. Less people spending money leads to less hiring, and you basically just have a depressionary spiral. Well, the Keynesian economic thought, which is one that our government and Federal Reserve like to follow, is that, well, if times are tough, we should stimulate the economy. So how might they do that to stop a jobless spiral? Well, there are a few ways they might do that. The easiest way to think about this is, first, how are they likely to continue supporting an anti-jobless spiral regime? Well, first, we know this with certainty already. We expect they would amplify the debt ceiling. It seems like when I type today, this HDMI connector is just trash. I bought a new cable, so I'll fix this for next time. But let's go back here. So the first thing they might do is amplify the debt ceiling, which is basically saying they'll raise the debt ceiling, right? Once you raise the debt ceiling, what can you then continue to do? Well, you could continue to spend on chip-related investments. Why would you continue to spend on chip-related investments via the CHIPS Act, where you could basically just, and you don't even need Congress to do this. Remember this. You could literally have the Biden administration just read the law of the CHIPS Act, where they've agreed to, $80+ billion in spending in chip manufacturing, and they could just loosely interpret it to where all of a sudden, instead of spending $80 billion, they're actually spending $240 billion. Yes, a 3x is possible. That's what Goldman Sachs said in a piece we covered just 3 days ago, where Goldman Sachs thinks that institutional stimulus check spending could actually be 3 times as expensive as previously thought because of the way the Biden administration is interpreting it. So, what if they just interpret it so loosely that it's actually a 4 or 5 times investment? Well, now what you're doing is you're creating jobs by going into more debt. That's likely to happen in chips. It's likely to happen in EV. It's likely to happen in solar, hydro, and other scientific-based, in my opinion, investments that the Biden administration can justify under acts that have already been passed. So I think the debt ceiling gets raised hands down if we're knocking on a door of recession. That then enables the government to spend more money on programs that they've already passed without the help of a bipartisan Congress. Another thing that could potentially happen, and we don't know this, is you could potentially, good Lord, you could potentially have a bipartisan effort on expanding unemployment protections in the event that you have an unemployment crisis. Now, these unemployment benefits would probably be conjoined with some kind of demand that individuals work. I don't believe that Congress is going to go back to the days of here's massive unemployment compensation for no work. I think there will probably be look for work requirements if Congress were to expand in a bipartisan way unemployment protections. But I think this would probably be the biggest stimulative effect that Congress would have on the economy. Is not only the Biden administration in their own way basically increasing stimulus checks that have already been written. Remember what Goldman Sachs said. They said, hey, we've got about $390 billion in stimulus checks that'll probably end up costing around $1.2 trillion because the Biden administration is just going to loosely interpret those rules. But I actually do think that Congress could, in a bipartisan way, increase unemployment compensation stimulus checks as long as people agree that they're looking for work. I think that's how you can get a pretty divided Congress right now, Democrats and Republicans on the same page and actually printing money again, supporting massive unemployment checks for people who have been laid off, especially in, dare I say, the tech sector. I think there's a chance you're going to see a high level of tech unemployment, and that's going to lead to higher unemployment checks to make sure people who basically funded, it's so frustrating, who basically funded a very expensive lifestyle. I feel like I'm taking a Nintendo Switch here. I've got expensive HDMI cables, expensive Apple dongles, but no. Oh, don't you just love seeing Kevin blow? Anyway, so there's this chance that you have the tech sector that has an expensive, much more expensive lifestyle, right? More expensive cars, more expensive apartments or whatever, that actually ends up fueling calls for higher unemployment checks because they're now unemployed and regular unemployment won't help them pay the bills they signed up for under salaries that they used to be used to because of unemployment caps, basically. So there is the potential that you see stimulus checks come back in the form of higher unemployment compensation, as long as, to appease Republicans, there's a look for work requirement. That's a potential. Now, what about straight up just stimmy checks? Is it possible, stimmy checks, is it possible that the Federal Reserve and Congress issue stimmy checks? Well, first you have to ask, would the Fed print more money in the event of a painful recessionary dynamic that lasts long? So in long recession, right? So let's say Q3, Q4, we go into recession, and by Q1 2024, we're still in recession. Basically, the Fed went too far. Is it possible that maybe instead of getting stimmy checks to the tune of, $1,200 and then $1,400, and then actually it was the other way around. It was $1,200, then we had the $600, then we had the $1,400 from the Biden step up, then you had the child tax credit, right? Is it possible that we end up getting a revisit of some form of stimmy checks? Maybe. Do I think it would ever be to the degree that we saw here? Very unlikely. It's very unlikely we would go back to this kind of stimulus. However, is it possible that there would be a one-off? Maybe. I think before you'd ever get to a runoff, and you would not want to pray for that, because I think we would be in a pretty deep recession if you prayed for that. But I do think they'd probably go back to some of the protections that they previously had, which were very inflationary. The expansion of the money supply is what created the inflation that we have today. But I think they would actually and potentially make the same inflationary mistakes that we had the last time around, just to a slightly lower degree. I think, though, you could almost say with certainty, okay? So let's put some odds on this. I think you could say with certainty that is like 99% likelihood, which is basically certainty, that they are going to, via the Biden administration, print their way out of whatever recession we're going into by dumping money, showering money into the chip sector and the energy sector. The Inflation Reduction Act was a ruse. It's not going to reduce inflation. It's going to increase inflation. But because they told Republicans it was going to be deficit neutral and everybody believed them, and now the Biden administration can loosely interpret every rule they want, there's going to be a massive amount of spending here. So if you're looking for a job, you're probably always going to be able to get a job in chips, manufacturing, EV, solar, hydro, you name it. Over there, I don't think there'll be a shortage of jobs, which I actually think is going to be fantastic if you're exposed to those kinds of stocks. Now, with maybe a 40% chance, I would say Congress actually works together to raise unemployment compensation as long as there are look for work requirements. I'd actually go as far as saying 40 to 60% in the event we're in a recessionary environment. And then stimmies, I'd probably say a one-off has maybe, under the Biden admin, maybe a 20% chance. But it would really require a dirty recession, so you probably wouldn't want to go down that direction. So that would be a little scary. So somebody here says, why would you stimulate, the truth is out there, says, why would you stimulate the economy while at the same time slowing the economy? So the only way this really plays out, in my opinion, is that inflation is conquered. So inflation ends up proving to be transitory, right? So let me give you an example of what that could look like with data that's already happening. I want to pull up a NatWest piece, and then I want the costs for shipping. I have so much data on my iPad, it's insane. But it's somewhere around here. There, got it. That wasn't bad. Look at this. Shipping costs out of China. I even wrote next to it, this is what transitory looks like, okay? That right there is what transitory inflation looks like. So I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, wait a minute. How could you possibly go back to stimulus checks if you have all this crazy inflation? Well, you can't. Here's how you go back to stimulus checks, okay? Number one, inflation goes away. Inflation goes away. Goes away. That's number one. So step number one is inflation goes away. However, to get there, oh, it's so annoying. However, to get there, you actually had to push the economy into a nasty recession. So let's write that. However, now in nasty, oh my Lord, whatever, man. You're in a nasty recession. So inflation goes away, and now you're in a nasty recession. Now that you're in a nasty recession and you have no inflation, guess what the government can now do? They can print their way back out, but less than last time. So that becomes the rule, right? So the rule becomes, look, we'll print, but we just need to make sure we're printing less than last time because we don't want to create the inflation again that we did last time. So let's draw that out for you for a moment. So inflation goes away. However, now we're in a nasty recession, so we want to print our way out, but we're going to do so less than last time. So imagine this. I'm going to draw a really big orange line here, and this is going to be inflation, okay? So let's say we get inflation that does this, okay? And then it goes negative. So we're actually at deflation. Well, now the government prints money via stimulus checks or increased unemployment or chips or EVs, whatever. So they print money to push inflation back up, and they basically try to cause that, right? That's the goal. Will they be able to accomplish that? Probably not. They'll probably screw something up because that's what they're really good at. But it could happen. It could absolutely happen that we end up falling into deflation, just like this chart shows you. I mean, look at this chart. This is shipping costs out of China plummet. That's what our inflation is probably going to look like. Now, is it possible that it'll look a little bit more like this? You know, where basically it stays higher for longer. You know, it could even to some extent kind of look like that, right? Is it possible? Yes. But if we get to deflation because of a deep, dark recession, I think they'll turn the printers right back on and we'll be right back to stimulus check 17. So yes, it is possible. But there's another thing that is possible as well. And it is you getting 12 amazing free stocks by signing up for Webull at metkevin.com/free. Checking out the amazing programs on building your wealth, link down below, where you get lifetime access and you can now buy now, pay later for them. You can get in for, I think, less than $40 a month for a very short period of time, which is phenomenal. Just check out all the different options linked down below. And you could get life insurance sponsored here for as little as, in as little as 5 minutes. 5 minutes, life insurance. You can Apple Pay for it now. It's easy to do. Check it out, link down below. In the meantime, look at my beautiful banner here. Look at that, Meet Kevin, licensed financial advisor. Go to meetkevin.com to learn more. ETF, real estate startup, affiliates, all that good stuff. It's all linked down below. Why not go check it out? Support your favorite channel here on YouTube.